Hi, this is Kristen Shekel, physician assistant with the Society of Veteran Disability Examiner PAs. I want to create a quick video to go over a new reference guide that we created highlighting presumptive conditions caused by military service under the PACT Act. So this is for veterans that served and were exposed to burn pits, Gulf War exposures, Agent Orange, Camp Lejeune, asbestos, or radiation. And you'll see different columns on this quick reference guide. We've updated it to be a little bit more user-friendly than our previous reference guide we created in 2024. So we have columns and then head-to-toe organ systems listed so that it will help in a busy clinic schedule more quickly identify different conditions that your patient who is a veteran may be able to receive benefits for under the PACT Act. So the first thing I'd like to touch on is what a presumptive condition is. So under the PACT Act and the Code of Federal Regulations, conditions presumed to be caused by military service are established by, it takes a lot of research and legal proceedings, and the veteran does not need to prove, as they would under if they're seeking ordinary service connection, the condition is presumed to automatically be caused by this toxin. So for example, burn pit exposure, if you have a veteran who the VA concedes was exposed to burn pits, if they have melanoma, it doesn't matter if they were worked outside after separating from the military without sunscreen, family history, if they were exposed to burn pits and they have melanoma, skin cancer, then they may be eligible for benefits under the PACT Act because it is presumed that their exposure to burn pits caused melanoma. There is such a strong link in the medical literature showing that burn pits have carcinogenic potential that is how the VA has determined these different conditions. It's from a lot of scientific evidence, research from the Agency for Toxic Substances, registries, all of it combined is how that they have identified these presumptive conditions. And it's changing too. It's constantly being expanded, the conditions presumptively caused by these chemical agents from military service. So there are some updates too with the conditions listed, such as Parkinson's disease, linked now to Agent Orange, and Parkinsonism. So that's new for 2025 compared to 2024 as well. So, just orienting from head to toe, burn pits, for example. So we touched on the melanoma. If your patient that you're seeing, and it could be in any setting, just even a civilian primary care setting, say you have a patient with melanoma, it's really important to ask your patient if they have a history of military service, and if they do have a history of serving in the military, were they potentially exposed to burn pits or any other toxic substance too, like radiation. That is linked to skin cancer as well. So taking that history and obtaining that information that your patient was a veteran who could have been exposed to these substances, then you can direct them to a local VA center where they can receive a PACT Act screening exam and be part of a registry, depending on what their exposure was during their service. But again, looking at burn pits, you'll see upper respiratory conditions caused by burn pit exposure, neck cancer, different lower respiratory tract conditions, GI conditions, renal cancer, reproductive tract cancer, glioblastoma or brain cancer, lymphoma, and sarcoidosis. So it's really a lot of different conditions that we would see in internal medicine or primary care are presumptively linked to burn pit exposure. Burn pits were used significantly in the Gulf War, including Desert Shield and Desert Storm, Afghanistan, Southwest Asia service. And burn pits were used to burn classified material, trash, uniforms, a wide variety of things were burned, and then it released toxic volatile organic compounds in the air, which now we know are carcinogenic and cause respiratory issues, along with autoimmune. For Gulf War service, this refers to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and post 9/11 service in the Southwest Asia theater. And during our upcoming talk in AAPA 2025 in Denver, we will be going into the geographical areas as well covered under the PACT Act. In terms of the skin, unexplained symptoms involving the skin is presumptively linked to Gulf War service. So I've seen this multiple times with a veteran who has, for example, lichenoid dermatitis or an unexplained dermatitis of the skin. And they never had any skin issues prior to joining the military. And then, for example, they were in Afghanistan, a lot of contaminated water that they were forced to shower in Afghanistan. And then they developed a skin condition. So it's very important to get the timeline of when their signs or symptoms involving their skin started in relationship to their exposure. Unexplained cardiovascular signs and symptoms, unexplained respiratory, irritable bowel syndrome, or other functional GI disorders, such as constipation, unexplained menstrual disorders, headaches, any of these infectious diseases, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, all of those could be potentially linked to Gulf War service. So it's important, again, if you have a patient you're seeing in primary care for these conditions, that you direct them to the VA so that they can start that application for benefits if that's what they would like to proceed with, because these benefits that they can get under the PACT Act not only provide monetary compensation, but also cover their medical treatment. Agent Orange, that was sprayed in Vietnam, and it was an herbicide agent that destroyed foliage such as trees, bushes, so that the enemy wouldn't be able to hide in the foliage in Vietnam. And soldiers who were exposed to that, you'll see a tremendous amount of different conditions that are now established as most likely due to Agent Orange exposure, including hypothyroidism, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, ischemic heart disease. So anybody who has a stent or who have had a CABG, anything like that, bladder cancer, prostate cancer, Parkinsonianism and Parkinson's disease, peripheral neuropathy, lymphomas, multiple myeloma, MGUS, amyloidosis. So demographic that would currently be alive who may have been exposed to Agent Orange would be patients in their 70s to 80s currently. And so it's important, if you're treating a patient, every patient really, but especially ones with type 2 diabetes, hypothyroidism, hypertension, ischemic heart disease, to just simply ask about any history of military service. And again, if you identify they do have that history of military service, encouraging them to connect with the VA to get a PACT Act appointment and to also consider applying for disability benefits. And again, just going over the presumptive part of this PACT Act, prostate cancer, for example, or bladder cancer, a lot of times you think about, especially in a male patient, did they smoke? Do they have a family history? If they were exposed to Agent Orange and the VA concedes that their military service in Vietnam exposed them to Agent Orange, they could have also been stateside as well, because Agent Orange was stored in barrels across the United States at different bases, and soldiers were expected to guard those barrels of Agent Orange. Fires would sometimes break out too on these military bases, aerosolizing the Agent Orange. So it not necessarily they had to just be in Vietnam. So if the VA concedes that their unique military service exposed them to Agent Orange, then they don't have to prove that their other potential risk factors for prostate cancer or bladder cancer were less likely than their exposure to Agent Orange. is automatically linked that Agent Orange exposure was the most likely cause of their bladder cancer or prostate cancer, just as an example. Same thing with hypertension, ischemic heart disease. They could have been, maybe overweight or had a family history of hypertension. But if they were exposed to Agent Orange under the PACT Act, that Agent Orange is considered such a significant risk factor for causing hypertension or ischemic heart disease. That's really all that the VA cares about, is that they were exposed to Agent Orange. They have this condition, such as hypertension or ischemic heart disease, and they don't need to go improve anything else. Just that they have that condition and that they were exposed to that chemical. For Camp Lejeune, the chemicals were in the water, and that was a Marine Corps base in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, originally established in 1942, and the water became contaminated in the 1950s. It wasn't discovered, though, until the 1980s, and it was because of two different treatment plants on the base that were contaminated with trichloroethylene, perchloroethylene, and other volatile organic compounds from a cleaning, ABC 1 Hour Cleaners, an off-base dry cleaning firm that contaminated the water that led into the military base. And so if they served from their specific dates as well on the Code of Federal Regulations, but from the 1950s to 1980s, if they served for a certain amount of time on that Camp Lejeune base, then they could presumptively be service connected for these conditions. And you'll see a lot of cancer. You'll see infertility and miscarriage, Parkinson's disease as well, tremor, and multiple myeloma, different malignancies, hepatic steatosis, and scleroderma. So again, hepatic steatosis, how many people do we see with fatty liver? But then how many of those patients do we know if they, were a veteran and if they served at Camp Lejeune? So that's why we've tried to simplify this, head to toe organ system based approach for, a busy clinic schedule, to just kind of get more familiarity with these conditions that are linked to these exposures. With asbestos, just respiratory conditions, asbestosis, lung cancer, mesothelioma, pleural plaques in the lungs. And then radiation exposure, you'll see a lot of cancer, a lot of malignancies that are presumptively linked to radiation exposure. You also see cataracts and thyroid nodules, parathyroid adenomas. So again, very, very important, driving home the point to ask all patients if they served in the military, and then if yes, do they have any concerns about toxic exposures that they may have encountered during their military service. These are the references that we use in creating this quick reference guide. It's a combination of discussion about the PACT Act benefits on the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs website, along with the Code of Federal Regulations website. And all our references have been updated for 2025 with the current PACT Act presumptive conditions. I'll also include as a link below this YouTube video different handouts that you can provide to patients on kind of next steps if you do identify that they have a health condition that could be related to their toxic exposure during military service. They can reach out and get a PACT Act appointment. They can meet with a benefit specialist. They can submit a claim for disability benefits and go through a compensation and pension exam. And then this is just some information for them about the PACT Act and the toxic exposure screenings and different registries that they may be eligible for. I hope this helps, and we look forward to seeing you in May 17, 2025 for our main stage presentation. That's going to be Saturday, May 17th, 2025 at 8 a.m., where we will be presenting on the main stage at the AAPA conference about the PACT Act and its applicability to primary care and really all PAs from all specialties, just to be aware of this to help veterans get the benefits they deserve. Thank you so much.